Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Samsung Galaxy A10e. As we briefly touched on in our unboxing video, this is pretty much the best budget smartphone that you can find for around 50 bucks without a contract in the holiday shopping season. As we talked about in our unboxing video, Samsung has been pretty aggressive in the past year in terms of pumping out relatively affordable smartphones in response to stiffening competition from Chinese companies like Xiaomi, Realme, among others. And they've been pretty successful in terms of lowering the prices of their devices, but still retaining really good value. And I think that the A10e is an excellent example of that. Again, the $50 that you'll pay for the A10e, which is just insane and something that even the Chinese brands really can't compete with at this point. So Samsung is really trying to reclaim that market segment which they lost. Starting with the design of the smartphone, you really can't tell that this is a super budget phone just because it has a full edge-to-edge display, which Samsung calls infinity screen, with a V-shaped notch on the top, which houses the front-facing camera, which is 5 megapixels, along with a tiny little earpiece. And then on the very bottom, there's a small chin, but it still is really compact. And as we saw in our unboxing, actually is an even smaller bottom bezel than the Samsung Galaxy S8, which was their flagship phone from less than 2 years ago. The screen here measures 5.8 inches diagonally, great for watching content and videos with, but at the same time still being relatively compact in a day and age where we now have phones with 6 inches and 6.2 inch screens. Again, 5.8 inches is still pretty small. The overall size is similar to phones from before that had the older aspect ratio, like this original Google Pixel, which has a 5-inch screen, but as you can see, the overall body size is still about the same. Now, unlike Samsung's more expensive phones, the display is not using AMOLED technology, so you don't get as punchy looking blacks. However, it's using still a very solid quality IPS LCD panel, which offers really good viewing angles. Now, the body of the phone is constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic with that hyper glaze finish, which is pretty common in Samsung's phones of yesteryear. It's not going to feel as premium in the hands as on their more expensive flagship devices, which are made out of glass and aluminum these days. However, as a result, it does feel more sturdy. Chances are it's not going to break, and you don't really need to have a case on top of it. Now, on the rear, there's access to a single 8 megapixel autofocus camera with an LED flash. On the base is a very modern USB Type-C port for charging. Now, the phone does not support quick charging, unfortunately, although getting from 0 to 100% doesn't take that long, under 2 hours. There's still a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is excellent to see, alongside with a loudspeaker. Now, this phone also comes equipped with Bluetooth 5.0, which is also really amazing because there are still countless smartphones like the aforementioned Xiaomi Mi A3, more expensive, which still use an older Bluetooth 4.2 chip. So 5.0 is going to give you even better battery performance and longer connectivity range, less latency when you're connecting it to wireless earbuds. The side here also features a SIM/microSD card slot for expanding the built-in memory. The phone, by the way, comes with 32 gigs of built-in storage. About 22 gigabytes are remaining for you to download your own apps and content. Perhaps the only real omission from a hardware perspective is the lack of any biometric sensors, so you won't find a fingerprint scanner, for example, on this device, which means if you want to unlock it, you have to use a PIN, a password, or rely on the face unlock feature, which does indeed work using the front-facing camera, but it's not quite as secure as, say, on the latest iPhones, since there isn't really a depth sensor. Again, it does work in a pinch. So moving into the software and performance, now the phone itself is running on the Exynos 7884 chipset, which is octa-core. Compared to Qualcomm Snapdragon chipsets, the performance here sits between the Snapdragon 636 and the Snapdragon 660. So those are both really solid mid-tier processors that you'll also find on Android phones typically selling for $200 and above. Really, it's quite smooth and without any signs of delay or sluggishness for the most part, and again, really outperforms its price. Even if it was being sold at $200, it would still be a really solid CPU that Samsung has chosen. Otherwise, it's technically running on Android 9.0 Pie on top of Android One UI, which is already pretty up to date, and there's access to full gestures for on-screen navigation, which works quite well. There's some hints at what the areas that you can swipe on to do various commands like back, home, and multitasking. You can also open up, say, additional apps, and if I go back home, I can swipe from this side here to slide back and forth between currently open applications. Samsung has even promised announced a software update coming in the following months that will upgrade this phone to Android 10.0 with One UI 2.0. Typically, budget phones don't receive any software updates at all, so for Samsung to guarantee an upgrade to the next generation, latest Android OS is just insane for only $50. Let's launch into the camera quickly. Again, for this price, you can't expect outstanding camera performance, but it's passable for the price. There's the ability for it to quickly zoom in and out 2 times at a click of a key. It is going to be a digital zoom as opposed to optical though, so you should hold relatively still. There is auto HDR that can sometimes pop in and add some more contrast and pop to your images, which is nice, especially when you're shooting outdoors. I can slide back and forth record video up to HD resolution, a pro mode that you can fine adjust the white balance and exposure and ISO even more, and we can see that the overall effect is really not shabby at all. It's definitely helped by the fact that the screen here is so punchy and nice looking for the price, fills up to the sides, and gives you a really immersive viewing experience. The flash here also works quite well when you're shooting in the dark. Again, in good lighting conditions, there's still plenty of details that you can make out in the shots. Perhaps it only starts to degrade a little bit when you are in lower light environments and you have to hold more still. The only difference compared to more expensive phones is, I would say, the ability for you to capture different special effects like wide angle and also bokeh are obviously missing because it's only a single camera lens, but overall for a single lens it still is doing a pretty good job for the price. So here we're playing back a quick YouTube clip, just showing off again the vibrancy of the screen, which really is super nice for the price. And we can see that viewing angles are wide and generous with nice looking colors. We can of course pinch to fill in the entire sides of the phone and just makes it look even more immersive. Now the battery capacity inside is 3000 milliamp hours. I would say it's only about average. For a phone of these specifications, it will definitely last you through an entire day, but it's also not going to be really a real endurance king. It's not going to quite stretch to say more than 2 days. So at the very least, it's not that easy to get covered up. You can set it onto a table and the music still comes out. It does get relatively loud, but it distorts a little bit at higher volumes. But overall, it's definitely a passable speaker. You can always use your own headphones or use Bluetooth 5.0 wireless headphones, and that further improves the audio quality, especially because when you are using headphones, Samsung is also giving you the ability to toggle on Dolby Atmos, which can further increase kind of the immersiveness of the sound. Facebook is pre-installed by default. There are a few other kind of bloaty apps, including Wish, Pandora. These are all pre-installed. In addition to some of these games here are also installed out of the box, including Bubble Shooter, Cube Rush, World War Rising, and also Solitaire. So if you don't want to use some of these apps, you can try uninstalling them, but it does occupy a little bit of space when you first take it out of the box. Back into the browser for a quick web browsing test. Let's try to jump into The Verge. Really no complaints here, just because, again, the Wi-Fi signal strength is quite good with the antennas and also the processor, the 7884 Exynos chip. If we want to, we can try loading back the desktop site, and we're not going to have too many issues either. Now, in terms of RAM, it's one of the other slightly weaker aspects of the phone because it comes with just 2 gigabytes. So Samsung is still a little stingy in that department. It's fine when you have just a small amount of app. It's perfectly fine when you have just a few apps open and you're focusing on one task at a time, but if you have too many things running in the background, it can start to boggle down a little bit. So my recommendation is to be a bit more conscious of the apps that you have open and manage it using a bit more attention and care, and otherwise it should still work quite well. As far as the essentials, including making phone calls, are concerned, I'm glad to say that the A10e performs really nicely. Again, the reception strength for the antennas is excellent, so I consistently received almost full bars here in the Seattle region, so no complaints there. The last thing to really talk about, I think, would be gaming performance, even if you're playing back more graphically demanding titles, such as PUBG, Asphalt 9, or some of these other versions of games that we're trying out right now. So as you can see here, it makes for a very impressive experience. With that being said, if you are kind of a heavy gamer and you're always expecting to play the games at the highest graphical settings, then this is probably still not going to be the device for you, even though it already is performing super nicely for a budget phone and a mid-tier processor. So overall gaming performance definitely is extremely good for the price. Again, typically phones in this range will have MediaTek chipsets, which will be pretty awful on their entry-level quad-core configurations. Or if you're looking at a Snapdragon-powered device, typically it's going to be a Snapdragon 400 series, maybe the 625, but that's not going to be quite as good as the performance that we're seeing here. So that's more or less it as far as our review of the Galaxy A10e. Again, for the price, it's pretty much an unbeatable ultra-budget phone. A really nice overall user interface that feels smooth and responsive with lots of accessibility features. Really, there's tons of details that are impressive here, from having a USB Type-C charging port, whereas the majority of phones in the price range still use micro USB, to giving you the latest Bluetooth 5.0 chip, whereas most phones in this price only have Bluetooth 4.2. So Samsung has given us a ton of value. So you can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Samsung Galaxy A10e, a $50 Android phone with a super clean design and surprisingly solid performance.